Excuse me. Start in just a few more minutes. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. All right, folks, now's as good a time as any to start. So, welcome to my planetary interaction tutorial for EVE Online. I'm going to assume that you know how to play the game, that you have it installed, that you can log in, and that you know what, skills are and fitting and, some of the basics like that. I am going to assume, however, that you have never done anything with planetary interaction before, though. All right, so first things first. Go away. First things first, don't harass the presenter. um, okay, so I'm going to format this where I'm going to demo a few different ways to do PI, and then I'll open up some Q&A. All right, so whenever you're doing PI, you need to start out with the planetary management skills. These are int mem skills, so primary is intelligence, secondary is memory. That's referencing to your character attributes. So if you're training them and you're really focusing on them, ideally you want as much in intelligence and then secondarily in memory as possible. Let's go back there. Okay, so the first skill that you want to start with is Command Center upgrades. And let me just actually show info on all of these. I'm not going to cover them all in detail just yet, but I will go over them ultimately as I go through this little demo. Derp, 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 derp. Okay. All right. Pull up the description. So, what we've got here. Command Center upgrades. Each level in this skill improves the quality of command facilities available to you, in turn allows for a greater number of connected facilities on that planet. Now, despite the fact that these are mainly int mem skills, you'll notice that Command Center upgrades and interplanetary consolidation are charisma intelligence. So it gets a little annoying that way, but generally int mem is what you want to go. Command Center upgrades is going to be one of the most important skills. This is the first one you want to get up quickly. Ideally, get to level 3 or 4 before you start doing anything else. Basically, the more you upgrade your Command Center, the more stuff you can put on the planets. It's a little more nuanced than that, but generally that's how that works. Okay, the next most important skill is going to be interplanetary consolidation. For each level in this skill, you may install a command center on one additional planet to a maximum of 6 planets. You can have only one command center per planet. Now, this one's decent, but the training time's a little bit longer. This is what you should start working on after you get command centers up to 3 or 4. This lets you have more planets. So you start off where you can only put stuff on one planet, and then for each level you can get one more. You'll notice these are all omega skills, so PI is not exactly a alpha clone sort of thing. But Yeah, this one takes a while. I recommend getting this up to about 2 or 3, depending on how many planets you want. The next skills, planetology and advanced planetology. This basically makes it so that when you're scanning a planet, you have a more accurate assessment of the resources. These are just kind of a logical progression in the same way that mining and astrogeology is a logical progression. We have a 3x and a 5x training time multiplier. Get, planetology, get it up to a reasonable amount. Go into advanced planetology if you really want, but it's not a big deal. Remote sensing, um, generally you don't need it, but if you're one of those kinds of people that you want to go to a particular area and then just take a look at everything in like all the adjacent systems, this will be helpful, but usually not too big of a deal. But command center upgrades and interplanetary consolidation are the main skills for doing any sort of PI work. All right. So great. You've got your skills. What do you do next? Well, that's where these command centers come in. There's a huge variety of them. You can get them on the market. If you go to planetary infrastructure, command centers, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them, one for each type of planet you can put a command center on. If you pull the info, you'll notice that there's a whole bunch of expires in 364 days. That's because these are sold by NPCs for a flat cost. It's always 81,000 ISK, so if you're seeing anything for higher or lower, so like, yeah, right here, 80,000, that's a player selling this. Generally players like this one try to rip you off. So, but yeah, so buy it from NPCs, 81,000 discs. That's a pretty small amount. Each of these is 1,000 cubic meters a unit, so this is not something you can just throw in any ship. I have a Tyra here, with 24,000 cubic meters, so more than enough space for all of these. And for the time being, I'll just chuck all of these into my Tyra. All right, great. Now I'm docked up. Let me see here. I'm gonna undock here. So you start with a command center, but you also need to figure out what planet you want, because that's going to tell you what command center that you're going to use. Undock, please. Yes, for those who are curious, this is one of my alts in my alt corp that has a station around this pretty blue star. Pretty. So, anyways. All right. So we've got this star system. It's got planets. This particular one has 9 planets. And let me take a quick look at what I've got. Yeah, Lava Command Center. Perfect. So let's go warp to the customs office around Jackery 1. Now, I'll explain customs office a little bit later, but customs office are kind of a central point for PI for the most part. There are exceptions, but you usually want to work with a customs office when you're doing PI when it comes to pulling goods off and putting goods on. Alright, so warp in there. Chugga, chugga, chugga. There we go. There's a planet. Hello, lava planet. You have lots of lava. Alright, and then here's the customs office. Great. So let's start off by looking at this planet in the correct mode. So I'm going to click here, Planets, Jackery 1, View Planetary Production. That's going to put me into basically the PI mode. Alright, and I can basically just look at the planet, spin it around, and over here, there's Build and there's Scan. So generally speaking, you want to start off with Scan. So let's see here. Base metals. I click on that. Now you'll see there's not a lot lit up here. There's this color overlay, but it's pretty faint. Maybe a little more noticeable here. There's this slider here, and you'll notice if I pull this down, everything kind of pops. I pull this down all the way, it's like, whoa, that's really colorful. And slide it up. Now this is me adjusting. So this little band here, that's sort of like the density measures. And this is the low end and this is the high end. How exactly this works, and this is a little confusing at first, is that the colors that you see here match sort of the the rough quantity that they mark off in here. So you like the whites are going to be the high end, but it only goes up to like 1, 2, 3, 4, this fifth notch up here. So if I pick heavy metals though, you notice there's a lot more stuff, and if I pull this up, yeah, you can see that, this spot here is on par with, about the 5.5 mark here. So it gives a sense on roughly how much there is. Oh, and there's even more hefty pieces spaces right up here. So I pull this up even more. And yeah, so the center points here correspond to about the 6.5. So, the really, really good spots right there. And this one especially, which doesn't start to dissipate until I pull it up to almost the 7 mark there. So this is basically your method your way of telling how much material is there for you to get. And it varies from the different types of materials. Every planet has 5 every time. So like suspended plasma, non-CS crystals, heavy metals, felsic magma, and base metals. You'll always find that combination in a lava planet, but each planet will have a different ratio between each of these. So, another lava planet might have more felsic metals but less heavy metals, or, different combinations. But every lava planet always has the same 5. Now, you can look at any planet in this view mode, even when you're not in the system, though generally if you're doing this for the first time, you generally do want to be in the system. All right, so let's go to Jackery 2, view planetary production. All right, this is a barren planet. And one of the ways you can tell what kind of planet it is if you pull info on the planet itself, it'll basically just tell you straight up planet barren. And planet Jackery 1, show info planet lava. Now, some planets are more common than others. The most common planet is gas. So those are gas giants, and I believe Jackery 6 is an example of a gas giant. Yeah, there we go, gas giant. And they're the ones that'll have the rings, so they can look kind of pretty. This one looks like someone decided to shit in the planet, so, whoop-de-doo. Um, and the second most common is going to be barrens. The least common is going to be plasma planets, and I will show that to you. I just hit F11 to put up this little side map here. See, I know there's a plasma planet over in Chanao. I believe it is planet 2. Plasma planets, I think, are one of the most gorgeous looking planets. I mean, they just have these like crazy looking blue things going on them. They're delightful. And generally speaking, they're also the planets that have the most suspended plasma. Now, one of the cool things that CCP did that I really like about this is that, you see I selected suspended plasma, and look at all the density areas that have it. It matches where all the blue stuff is on the planet. I think that's really cool. Personal preference. I kind of like that. And sometimes that happens, sometimes that doesn't. It just depends on the material. But suspended plasma with a plasma planet, you will see that happen. It's kind of cool. Some plasma planets don't have as much blue. They're not going to have as much suspended plasma. They usually have more of the other materials. But there's always a nice little balance. But plasma planets always have base metals, heavy metals, noble metals, non-CS crystals, and suspended plasma. Okay, great. So let's go back to the planet that we're at. So this is a lava planet, and we can make these items here. Now, this is where things can start getting complicated. I'm going to pull up the market to sort of explain this because it's kind of best understood there. And manufacturing research, materials, planetary materials. So this is where, when you set up a planet, this is what you can pull directly from the planet. This is referred to as the P0s, planetary materials zeros, as the first level. They are the raw planetary materials, and you can find them on the market here. There's a whole bunch of them, but every planet is going to have 5 of these, as I mentioned. Now, let me pull info on non-CS crystals. Planetary production. All right, extractable on plasma and lava planets, required for chiral structures, tier 1. So what this means is that non-CS crystals is a component to create chiral structures. And I'll get into exactly how that's done later. But let's pull info on chiral structures. All right, cool. So chiral structures takes 3,000 non-CS crystals to make. It's a component for P2s, tier 2 planetary stuff, of transmitters, consumer electronics, miniature electronics. Well, let me pull consumer electronics. All right, consumer electronics takes toxic metals, which we didn't talk about yet, and chiral structures, which we did, to produce consumer electronics. It is a component for tier 3 planetary materials of supercomputers and robotics. All right, let's look at robotics. Well, robotics takes mechanical parts and consumer electronics to produce itself, and it's a component for organic motor applicators of tier 4 or P4. Pull info on that. We've finally hit the end of the chain. There is 5 different types of planetary resources. The raw ones you extract from the ground, called P0 or tier 0. Then there is this processed planetary materials, tier 1 or P1. Then those go into, let's see, I believe it's, yes, refined planetary materials, tier 2 or P2, which then, let's see, I believe it's, yes, specialized planetary materials, tier 3 or P3, to advanced planetary materials, tier 4 or P4. Now, if you're doing Tech 2 production, certain smatterings of the P2s and P3s will be necessary. If you're doing anything to do with starbase or space stations, citadels, etc., and even some deployables like remote or deployable tractor units, the P4s are what you're going to want. Now, you'll see that these prices, we're talking like 1 to 2 million ISK per unit. These things are a major pain in the ass to produce, but if you can get a constant stream of producing these, you can produce approximately 1 unit every hour. The support to the support infrastructure to do that is insane. And if you've looked at some of the spreadsheets I put around, you'll see that this can get very complicated very quickly. Now, we're not going to dive into building a P4 right out of the gate. A single character cannot do that. It just does not happen that way. But a single character can easily go up to P2s, and with a little bit of clever work, P3s as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to start on this lava planet here. And let's see here. Let me figure out. So let me just go through the chain real quick here. So chiral structures. So, okay, chiral structures. And let's see about consumer electronics. That needs toxic metals, which is, okay, okay, great. So I'm going to set up this planet to harvest the heavy metals and the non-CS crystals. And now one of the cool things about most planets is with most planets you can go up to a P2 very easily by pulling 2 of the resources on it. So let's start with the heavy metals. That's the most dense. And alright, looks like my best bet, even though this has the highest concentration, there's 2 spots over here. So I'm going to start up over here. But I'm also interested in non-CS crystals. So I want to see if I can make a base that's close to it. Now you'll notice that non-CS crystals are not as dense. So I need to scale this back a bit to get a sense on the proper densities. And there's a decent spot here, but it looks like the best spots are going to be over here and down here. Well, let's take a look at the heavy metals again and see if there's any good heavy metal spots. Okay, so there's that there, and there's this here. These are reasonably close together. Okay, so not bad. So it's covering a good chunk of the planet, but it's not so far that it would be a problem. You generally want your base to be close to the resources, but never exactly on the resources, and I will show why in a bit. Alright, so I'll start off, let's see, have the heavy metals, scale that up so that I'm only seeing this. Now let's actually build our command center. So, when you have a planet that you haven't built anything on yet, and you have a ship with the appropriate command center in the cargo hold, note it needs to be in the cargo hold, not a fleet hangar, not any sort of other hangar. It has to be in the cargo hold proper. As such, the only ships you can really do this on are industrials and some of the ships that have ridiculous cargo holds, like Marauders. Do not do PI in a Marauder. All right. So you click the lava, you click the command center. It'll say, lava command center here. It'll say whatever command center the planet is. So if it's a barren planet, it'll say barren command center. You click that. You notice this little cursor, and I'm just going to zoom in here, scrolling the mouse wheel. Ooh, that's kind of a fancy little coloring thing going on there. And you'll see there's this little circle thing that's kind of hovering around as my cursor moves. All right, cool. This is basically saying click where you want this thing to go. So I click, and there it is. Now you'll notice this thing has this sort of yellowish highlight behind it. That means that it is not actually placed yet. It is just proposed to be placed. It is pending. And you can see that also by it says here edits pending and submit and cancel. Now, placing a command center is the only thing in PI that you build that does not cost anything. You've already spent ISK buying the command center itself. So you hit submit. And there you go. You have a planet. Congratulations. You have now colonized your first planet. Woo! All right. So let's take a look at this command center here. So we click on the command center and we see that it has a capacity of 500 cubic meters. It has a launch and transfer available. You'll generally ignore these for the command center. It has a CPU and a power grid rating of 1675 and 6000. And then you'll see it's got upgrade levels going from 1 to 6. Now, the upgrade level, so if I click upgrade, you'll see it duplicates the power output and CPU output stuff here. If I click on the second one here, you'll notice that it's plus 3000 power output and plus 5000 something CPU output. But cost 580,000 ISK. It costs to upgrade. Now this is tracing back to, all right, Joshua, go away. This is tracing back to your skills. So this command center upgrades skill. Now this character has this skill at level 5, but for every level of this skill, you can do one more level of upgrade. So if you don't have this skill at all, you're stuck at level 1. If you have the skill at level 1, you can upgrade your command center to level 2. If you have this skill at level 2, you can upgrade your command center to level 3, etc., etc., etc. The highest upgrade costs out of the gate 6.3 million ISK. Not bad, but not cheap, especially if you can build this on 6 planets. That can rack up expenses pretty quickly. Now, one of the nice things is that if you upgrade, like let's say that I take this to level 3. If I upgrade to level 3, it costs 1.5 million ISK. And then I later upgrade it to level 6. Well, level 6 costs 6.3, but if I've already upgraded it to level 3, it's going to be 1.5 million ISK cheaper because that's the cost there. So every upgrade is, it's not like it always costs 6.3 million to upgrade to level 6. It costs however much it costs to go from one step to the next. So from 1 to 2 is 5.8 million. From 2 to 3 is going to be the 1 to 3 cost minus the 1 to 2 cost. So, but just keep that in mind. You're not necessarily wasting money if you just upgrade one piece at a time. So I'm going to upgrade this to level 3 because most of you are probably still pretty early on with training the skill. You might have spent maybe a day on it or so. That's the 1.5 million cost. And so upgrade. All right, great. Now you'll notice that we have this edits pending thing come up again. We have the cost of the upgrade listed here. Just like with placing the command center, this is not a committed change. This is a pending change. It does not actually take money out of my account until I hit commit. And you notice I also do not have the ISK to do this. So, I'll just take some out of my my alt corp. Woot! All right, I have 10 million ISK to play around with. Great. So let's submit this and see what happens. Fantastic. You see, it took it out of my my ISK tally, but I've got the 12,000 CPU and power grid to work with now, as opposed to the really rink-a-dink. One thing I'll caution you about: you always want to do at least one upgrade level. Get it up to level 2. The reason being is that the CPU level with a fresh command center is not enough to support a launch pad. Now that's what I'm going to talk about next. I'm going to place the launch pad. Now I generally like to place my stuff as close as possible to each other, and I will get into that in a minute, but you can actually, once you place the command center, place your launch pad or place the entire facility anywhere you want. All right. Okay, good. So I placed that there. Same thing. It appears with that yellow pending thing. We have edits pending. I'm going to submit that. Great. And that cost me about 900,000 ISK. So Launchpad. Great. So it's got a storage of 10,000. Has this transfer available thing. It doesn't has no stored items right now. All right. So what the Launchpad is the Launchpad. Let me close out of the planet thing here. Is your connection to the customs office. So the customs office, you fly up to it. You can access the customs office. You can put stuff in the customs office. So you'll see this two-layer screen. One is the orbital customs office. That's this thing up here. You can put items in here from your ship. And then you can then transfer them down to your launch pad. Or if you have more than one launch pad, you have a choice of which one to send it to. It does cost to do this. And if you pull info on the customs office, you'll see first off who owns it. And then you can see the tax rate. The higher the tax rate is, the more it costs. And it costs based on a percentage of the value of the items you're transferring. Now this one's a 15%er, so that's a little on the high end, kind of frustrating. Now that tax will go directly to the corp that owns the customs office. This is stuff that, you can, if you like get a war deck and you own a customs office, someone can blow up your customs office, put their own in its place. That can absolutely happen. Or you can war deck someone to do that too. Or you can, negotiate a trade with them and have them dismantle it and you pay them a certain amount and, whatever. So just kind of how it goes. All right. So let's go back to the planet. And, oh yeah, since I've got the planet set up, if I go into my Neocom, and let's see here. Is it business? Yes, it's under business. There's planetary production. Click that. And there we go. All right, took a moment to load. You can see I have a bunch of older planets that I used to deal with back in the day. But your planet will appear here. You can just double click it and you'll pop right to it. Great. Okay, so I've got a way to access my planet so stuff can come off of and go onto it. Now I need to be able to get those resources out. But before I do that, you generally always want to put down a storage facility. So I'm going to plop one down and I'm going to put it right here. Just kind of squeeze it in. All right. So storage facility, you see this storage is 12,000, which is a bit bigger than the 10,000 that you have with the lava launch pad. Storage facility, generally when you're harvesting resources, you want to put it into something that has a large storage. You can for sure put it into a launch pad. I prefer to put it into a storage facility, just personal preference kind of thing. All right, so I'll hit submit, so that's built. Now let's build an extractor control unit. But first let me make sure I'm in the right scan settings. So let's pull the heavy metals up, adjust this so I can just barely see the white. Lava extractor control unit. And you see this has a radius to it. Now this radius is, when you place the extractor control unit, you can place down extraction heads. The extraction heads are what actually extracts the resources. An extractor control unit can have up to 10 heads on it, assuming you have the power grid to support it. Now, the radius that we're seeing here with the extractor control unit is how far can the head be placed from the unit. You want to make sure that head is covering the area you want to harvest. So that would be most of this circle here. So about here, but I still want to place it close to my actual base. And I'll show you why in just a moment. So great. Let's right click to deselect the placement there. So there is my extractor control unit. One additional thing I want to do, and now I'm going to control click here, the extractor control unit, and then drag this line all the way over to the storage. Now you'll notice, let me undo that real quick here. So select that link and decommission it. As the farther I drag it, it has this power and the CPU thing. This is a link. This connects facilities together to allow them to move goods between each other. And it costs more power and CPU the farther the link is. Now, here's an interesting quirk. If you pull info on the planet, one of the planetary attributes is radius. It's always going to be in kilometers. This one is 4,650 kilometers. The larger this radius is, the more it costs for you to build that link. This gets to be a huge problem on gas giant planets because their radius is gargantuan. You will usually spend a good 20 to 30% of your power grid and CPU on the links rather than the facilities. For a lava planet, it's usually not that big of a deal. All right, so we've got these connected. Great. Let's submit. Fantastic. So, all right. And one of the nice things about the extractors is that they're really cheap. So, show info on the extractor. Let's see here. No, that does not show the cost. That's annoying. But it's basically, there we are, 45,000. Links do not cost anything to build ISK-wise, so it's really just a matter of making sure that you're not overdoing your power grid. So, okay, great. So, I'm going to select the extractor here. So it says extracting program not active. That means it's not doing anything. We're not pulling anything out currently. But we do want to. So install extraction program. That's what we want to click. We get this little view here. Now select resource. This is asking what do I want to extract? Well, I want to extract heavy metals, so I select that. And the next thing to focus on is program duration. Basically, this is how long does it run for until it stops. There's a trade-off here. The longer you run it for, the less resources per hour that you're going to get, but the less micromanagement you have to do. So, for example, if you set the program duration to 1 day, you'll get a certain amount of resources. If you set it to 3 days, you'll also get a certain amount of resources. But if you do 1 day 3 times, you will get more resources than if you just do 3 days. So this is really a micromanagement trade-off. How much are you willing to hassle with doing this? Now I'm going to set this to 1 day. And one of the things you'll notice is that the time increments, like if I get up to 1 day, it starts moving in 30-minute increments, but back here it was 15-minute increments, and I get up here, it's moving in hour increments. I get up into the multiple days, it moves in like these 2-hour increments. So the increments change as you go up. So let's move this, bump this down to 1 day solid. Now there's installed extractors here, and there's 10 of these little buttons here. This is how many extractor heads you have. You control click on the planet. Yeah, I just like to click on the extractor head thing there, and you'll see this kind of pop up. And I'm going to put 5 of these up. Now you'll notice this little thing here. This is kind of cool. This tells you from when you start to when that day-long program finishes, and if you change this around, this changes, how much you're going to get with each cycle. Now, each of these is in 15-minute increments. Those increments will change if you do different larger times. So if you like go into 3-4 days, that's going to be 30-minute increments. If you go into like a week, that's about an hour-long increment. But at this point, it's like, my first cycle right here. Oops, there we go. Cycle 1. It's going to pull up 3,725 units after 15 minutes of that first cycle. You can also get the average units per hour across the entire cycle here. This is going to be a very, very useful value. Total is also kind of useful, but average is what you're really after. Now, I hover my cursor over it. You see it's got the little star thing. I can start dragging this. And I want this to pull out of that most dense spot. You can see this number value increases too. Raw output quality is now 152 as opposed to the 70s and 80s that I was getting from just where they default started. And the average per hour shifted. And you notice that this thing was starting to shift too as I was moving it around. So we want to position these so they are basically surrounding this resource here. Great. Now, average per hour, 21,176. Now I'm actually going to trim that down a bit So I'm going to click on an active head. Let's see here, 16, 12, 12. Let's get that a little bit less actually. Okay, that's a little bit too much less. So let's get these two heads there. Yeah, 8,418. That's pretty good. That's more than enough. So great. All right, start extraction. Now again, pending changes. These are not active yet. Now you'll notice one more thing with this selected. Now let me actually deselect for a second here. Close that off. See how it's got this red highlight around it? That means that the building is not doing something that it should be doing. And if I click on it, you'll see that not routed is in red here. So here's the problem. The extractor is going to pull up resources. Oops, no, go away. The extractor is going to pull up resources, but when it does, it's not going to have anywhere to send it because the extractor itself does not have any capacity. So what I need to do is I need to go to this products thing here, and you'll notice how it says amount, heavy metals, not routed. I click on not routed, create route, and I select down here our storage facility. I click create route. All right, great. So now if I deselect this, you'll notice that red thing vanished. If I go to our storage facility, routes, heavy metals, 5,009 incoming. 5,009 is actually less than I really want, so let me go back in, install extraction program, stop, add in another head, because I want to get that value to at least 6,000, and I will explain why that is in a minute here. So start extraction. Okay, good. Pull that off. And this value, yes, 7,500. Perfect, went up. Okay, awesome. So I'm now going to submit this. And now this is starting to extract. And you know that it's active is if you zoom in on the heads, you'll see there's this slow pulsing in. Great. Okay. Now what's happening here, I got the extractor selected. Current cycle, 16, 17, 18 seconds out of 15 minutes. And current cycle output, 4,441 units. Those will immediately get sent into the lava storage facility, which has 12,000 cubic meters. Now let's get a sense on how 4,000 some odd units is in cubic meters. So I'm going to right click on the heavy metal icon there. Attributes, volume is 0.01. It's the same volume basically as minerals. So let's fire up the calculator. 4441, and I'm doing this the grunt way. I could do this in my head, but I want to show you how the math works. 0.1. So that's gonna add 44.41 cubic meters. I have 12,000. I got plenty of space. Totally not worrying about that. Okay, great. Well, now I'm getting this material that's coming in, and I'm storing it here in my lava storage facility. Great. What am I doing with it? I'm not doing anything yet with it. Well, that's where these industry facilities come in. These things convert, or at least these things convert one level of material into the next level of material. And so I want to build, you always want to start with the basic industry facility. So as this reads, converts incoming goods to valuable products according to selected schematic and routes them to storage or other processors. Basic processors can produce any Tier 1 product from its corresponding raw resource extracted from planets. Well, we're extracting a raw resource, and we want to convert it into a Tier 1 or P1. So I'm going to build this, and I'm going to build it right next to my storage. Great, so that's there. And then I'm going to control-click to connect the storage and the processor and submit it. All right, great. So I select this processor. You see I've got this huge list of schematics here. This is all the different P1s. Well, I need to figure out the right P1 for what I'm bringing in. So let's go back to the heavy metals. I'm going to show info on it and go to planetary production. Well, this is required for toxic metals. So let's pull info on toxic metals. It's the input for toxic metals is, oh, actually, let's see here. Yeah, the input for toxic metals is just heavy metals. That's what we're extracting. So I can create toxic metals off of just heavy metals, just one input. Nice. Doesn't get that friendly with the higher up stuffs. So here, I want to go down to toxic metals and install that schematic. All right, so now we have something similar to, excuse me, this thing when we were just selecting where to route the output. Well, I want to route the output back into my storage facility. I mean, I'm only, adding like 40 some odd cubic meters every 15 minutes in there, no big deal. So I can handle whatever this is doing. So create route. All right, fantastic. So I've set the output, but I haven't set the input. And you'll notice that there's this little red text here saying input route's missing. And if I deselect this, there's this red circle around it to indicate, hey, the input route is missing. Well, that's because the storage here that has the heavy metals is not sending them over to this processor yet. So what I got to do is I got to select the storage, select this routes thing over here, and select the heavy metals, create route, select the processor, create route. Great. I'm going to hit submit. All right, you'll notice this isn't red anymore. And it all looks good. Now, waiting for resources. So I haven't actually got any resources yet. I'm not going to get them for another 11 minutes. Once that 11 minutes hits, the extractor, hover my mouse over it, you see how it's got that dotted line, or that moving dotted line, is going to send its resources to the storage, and then it's going to send the resources into this industry facility. Now here's where things get a little bit interesting and why you want to buffer everything in a storage facility, especially from extractors. So first cycle here is going to output 4,441 units. But if I look at the industry facility, input is only 3,000 units. So what's going to happen with those remaining 1,000 some odd units? If I didn't buffer it in the storage facility, those 1,000 some odd units would just vanish. I would lose them. But since I'm sending them to the storage facility and then to the processor, those 1,000 some odd units are going to sit in the storage facility and wait for the next cycle. Now, eventually, if you remember from the extraction program curve, this goes down as time goes on. Eventually, I'm going to start getting into this lower end where I'm pulling like 2,000 units every cycle. But I will have built up an excess from before over here that I'll still be able to continuously run the industry facility. Now the other interesting thing is that look at this, waiting for resources. The time on this cycle for the industry facility is 30 minutes as opposed to the 15-minute extraction time. So we're going to be accumulating a lot of stuff in here. And actually one of the ways to get a sense on the net input output based on the average amount that extractor is pulling every hour or every cycle is by looking at the routes on the storage facility. So we'll see that we have 7,500 coming in, 3,000 going out. We can actually support a second basic industry facility. So I'll set this up in the same way. Plop that there. I'll control click to generate a link between it and the storage facility. Hit submit. Click on this thing. Toxic metals, install. All right, set up the route to be back into the storage facility. Create route. And then I will select the storage facility and select always when you're doing routes from a storage facility, select the incoming type of the commodity. And create route. Click create route. Great. Submit. All right, so I am actually pulling in enough resources to support these two and have leftover. Have about half of an industry facility's worth of leftover. I'm going to just go with 2 for now because each of these, if I build one of these, it takes CPU and power. CPU is not usually a problem. Power is always a huge problem because power is what you need to run the extractors. All right, great. So that's doing its thing. So one of the things you might be wondering about, though, is, all right, I'm pulling some 4,000 some odd units of heavy metal, and heavy metal is 1/100th of a cubic meter for every unit. And okay, so I'm sending 3,000 units into here, and it's producing these toxic metals. It's producing 20 units of toxic metals. Well, I'm sending in about 30 cubic meters of stuff. How when I send it back out, is it going to be taking up more space? So let's pull info on toxic metals, the attributes. Its volume is 0.38 cubic meters a pop. So let me pull up my trusty calculator here. I'm just using the Windows calculator, so nothing fancy. So 0.38 times 20, 7.6. So this is one of the interesting things about every time that you move from like a P0 to a P1 or a P1 to a P2, you are going to, for the same for the input output conversion, reduce the amount of cubic meter space that you use. So in this case, our input is 30 cubic meters and our output is 7.6 cubic meters. So we've cut it down to less than half of the space from the input into that output. Now in this case, we got two of these running at 30 minutes a pop. So every 30 minutes, we're going to get 20 units there and 20 units there. So 40 units of toxic metal. And this is one of the nice things about setting it up this way is that you're really this storage facility is now really for the toxic metals. Sure, it's serving as a buffer for the heavy metals that it's extracting, but beyond just serving as like that storage buffer, this thing's really going to mainly serve as storage for toxic metals now. All right, fantastic. So now I mentioned that generally when you're setting up something like this, you can get up to a P2 by extracting two different types of resources. And we wanted to go with heavy metals and non-CS crystals so we can get the consumer computers or something like that. So, all right, so I'm going to do the non-CS crystals now, and I'm going to build another extractor control unit. And again, I want to try to keep it as close as possible to the main base because of the link distance, and still place this thing. Now, one of the things to notice, I place this, and we have these edits pending. I have power load. All right, current after edits max output. It's one of the nice things about placing these, but you'll notice that these extractor control units, they take up a holy crap ton of power, 2,600 megawatts. Good heavens, that's a lot. Never place more than two of these on a planet ever. Even if you have maxed out command center, never place more than two. It becomes atrocious. They're cheap to place. ISK-wise, they don't take much CPU, but they take a crap ton of power. All right. So I'm going to connect this thing up actually to the same storage. There we go. And submit. And that's an extractor without any heads. Each head takes power as well. So install extraction program. I'm interested in the non-CS crystals. And I want to aim, let's see here, program duration. One thing I didn't cover last time. Now I've got one head out, and I want to place this here. Watch what happens with this head as I increase the program duration. Can't notice it much, so let me jump it big. See how that increases? All right, now this head size is actually relevant. Let me put a second head down. See how I have them overlapping now, and there's this negative percentage? If your head's space overlaps, they are basically mining from each other's resource pools and cannot mine as much. So you always want to have your heads not overlapping. You can, but it's a bad idea. All right, so I want this back to 1 day. 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1 day solid. Okay, great. And let's see if I can get it up to how much I move these around just a little bit so that I'm swarming this. All right, let me get one more head. Ah! You cannot construct another extractor on this planet as it would dangerously overload your command center's power core. Well, that sucks. Thankfully, I can just upgrade this right here. Add another 3,000 megawatts. Great, let's do that. I'm going to do that. Now, mind you, at this point, this is going to be a level 4 command center. So you would need the command center upgrade skill at level 3 in order to mimic what I'm doing. All right, so plop that there. Average per hour, 13,500. That's perfectly fine. Start extraction. Make sure to route the product. Create route, and I want to plop this in the storage as well. So create route. Perfect. And let me just make sure that that's the correct amount that I want. So 8,011. Now that's more than I need. That's perfectly fine. Let me actually see if I can get away with removing one of the heads. So pull that, restart the extraction. Let's go back here. 6,026. Perfect. I want this over 6,000. Okay. Submit. Great. All right, all that's done. And the majority of that cost was in the upgrading the command center. The actual extractor, as you know, 45,000 ISK. I mention this because when you're done extracting in a particular spot, the resources from that spot will be depleted. If you try to extract again, you're going to get less. But as resources deplete in one area of a planet, they grow in other areas of a planet. So you can shift your extractors around to new locations and extract there, but you are still limited by the links because the longer the distance between your links, the more grid and CPU they take up. This isn't usually a big deal with distances like this. Like here we have um, yeah, we have a power load of 142 megawatts. This one's got a power load of 178. It's not too big of a deal, but if you have bigger planets especially, farther link distances can be a big problem. And you don't usually want to disassemble your base when you first assemble it. You want to leave it where it is because that's where the expensive buildings are. Like this industry facility, okay, 75K, not a big deal. The advanced one, 250K. The storage facilities, 250,000. The launch pad is almost $1 million. There's one more level of industry facility, and that one gets pretty pricey as well. So you generally want to keep your non-extractor base in the same spot the whole time. All right, so we're bringing in these non-CS crystals, and let's build another two of these industry facilities, and then link them with the storage. Submit that. All right, great. Now, all right, we're bringing in non-CS crystals. So what do those manufacture into? So planetary production, they manufacture into chiral structures, and the non-CS crystals are the only inputs to manufacture chiral structures. Perfect. All right, so chiral structures, install, route it back into the storage, create route, and I'll do the same thing over here. Chiral structures, install, route back into storage, create route. And then from the storage itself, I want to make sure the non-CS crystals are routed into those industry factories. Great, and then submit. All right, so all that's being done. And these are still waiting. And let's see here. Oh, yeah, looks like this got its first cycle. So we're on its next cycle. Now, you'll notice that this is now in production. It had 3,000 units and it shoved it in, and great, so it's beginning of production. Now the nice thing is the input can queue up for the next run while it's in the current run. Now what about this other one here? Well, let's look at this. We have a bunch of units that's just sitting in input waiting for more resources. So when the next 15-minute cycle hits here, that's going to fill up, and then it's going to fill up this empty storage here. So the storage proper is only going to fill up once these inputs are completely filled, and then any leftover is going to go into this storage facility here. And the same thing is going to happen with these down here. So this one we started later. It's going to take a little bit more time until it starts filling up, but the end result is that we're going to have a bunch of chiral structures and what are they called? Toxic metals sitting in our storage here. But let's do one more thing with that. Advanced industry facility. So let's read this. Advanced processors can produce any tier 2 or tier 3 products from the lower tier products. So let me plop that. I'll just put that right here. And I'm going to connect this also directly with the storage and submit. Now let's take a look at some of the info on chiral structures. Great. It's required for transmitters, consumer electronics, and miniature electronics. Well, consumer electronics is what we're interested in because toxic metals and chiral structures can produce the consumer electronics. Fantastic, because we're making toxic metals and chiral structures. So consumer electronics is a P2. So let's see here, consumer electronics, install. Now where do we want to route this? Well, let's say that this is our final product. I want to get this thing off the planet. I am done with it. Let me create one additional route between the storage facility and our launch pad. So submit that. Now, if I go back to our product, so not routed, the consumer electronics, our advanced industry, create a route to the launch pad. And you'll notice, interesting little thing here is that it's actually routing through the storage facility. It's one of the nice things about creating links is that you don't necessarily have to create a direct link between every little thing and every little thing. Links can route through facilities. So like this one, in order to route to the launch pad, I'm producing the consumer electronics in the advanced industry facility, and then it's routing to the launch pad through the storage facility. There's no limit on the amount of connections that something can be routed through. Works fantastically well to do it that way. So, all right, create route. Great. Now I need to set the inputs. All right, so routes, chiral structures, create route, putting that there. Awesome. And then toxic metals, create route, there. Great. Submit. All right, this is basically good at this point. But let's check one more thing, just to get a sense on timing. So, Lava Advanced Industry Facility producing consumer electronics. The input is 40 units of toxic metals, 40 units of chiral structures. It takes 1 hour to cycle, and it produces 5 units on output. Now, if you go back to one of these, you remember that each one of these basics would take 30 minutes to produce 20 units. So each of these is going to produce 40 units on each. So each one of these is going to produce 40 units of chiral structures per hour. So that means I'm going to have each hour 80 units of chiral structures and 80 units of toxic metals. Well, I can support a second advanced industry facility with that. Great, let's do it. And I'll just plop that right there. Create the link and submit. And consumer electronics. Notice I double clicked with that one actually, and I'm going to double click this. It's a little faster. So I created the route. Oops, and I miscreated the route. So I need to go back in here to products, route, select the route, delete route. Double click that. Double click that. I'll sometimes mess up the routes as well. All right, great. And then I also need to route the input correctly as well. So chiral structures, create route, put that in there. And toxic metals, create route, connect that. Perfect. So then every hour, each one of these advanced facilities is going to make 5 units of consumer electronics. And let's see here. So toxic metals are 0.38 cubic meters. Chiral structures are 0.38 cubic meters. Each tier or P level of a planetary good will always have the exact same volume. Just something to note as you're thinking about storage capacity. So calculator, so that's 80 units in total that are input. 80 times 0.38, so that's 30.4 cubic meters of input. Now let's take a look at the output. The output is 5 units of consumer electronics. Consumer electronics is 1.5 cubic meters, so 5 times 1.5 is 7.5. We have the same, roughly the same conversion rate. 30 cubic meters of resources going in, 7.5 is going out. And so we have the same thing going on over here. So we've got 2 of these running every hour, each one producing 5 units. That's 10 consumer electronics in total. Now let's take a quick look at the market details for consumer electronics. Of course, no orders because this is not a market hub. Well, let's go take a look at EVE market data. Take a quick look at our, let's see here. What's the GITA prices for consumer electronics? Forge. Actually, you know what? A better way of doing this. I'm not in that region. Well, but anyways, you should be able to do the calculations if you're in JITA, looking at what is the average price of consumer electronics, and with the idea that you're producing 10 units an hour, that should give you a calculation for how much you're making. But remember, there's a tax associated with pulling anything off planet that is a percentage of the item's price. Mind you, this is not going to be the JITA item price. There's some sort of funky calculation that CCP does to determine the estimated price of any good. It's going to be based off of that price, and that tax goes to whatever corporation owns the customs office around the planet. So let's see. In this case, we have that Dynacorp Corporation. All right. So this is generally a pretty solid setup. With this, we're in HiSec, and we're bringing in enough resources to support two advanced industry facilities in producing consumer electronics. Fantastic. But if you remember, the chain does not end there. Let's pull up info on consumer electronics. So consumer electronics can make supercomputers or robotics. Now, robotics is an important one because it's used in PI fuel. Let's pull info on that. Well, mechanical parts is the other input. And as you start getting into these higher level tiers, you'll see that there's two inputs, and sometimes with the P4s, there's three inputs in some cases. And so actually even some of the P3s have three inputs. All right, so we need mechanical parts. So we're making the consumer electronics, but mechanical parts, well, that needs reactive metals and precious metals. And reactive metals, well, that comes from base metals and from noble metals. Now, one of the cool things is if you go to a barren planet, base metals and noble metals, you can extract everything you need for the other half of making robotics on one of these barren planets. And then you just consolidate all of that into a single planet and you can produce robotics. Now, mind you, there is other ways of doing that. And let me go over to the Chano system. Planets. Chano 2. Go back to our plasma planet. One of the reasons they're so valuable. Heavy metals and non-CS crystals. Base metals and noble metals. There is everything on a plasma planet to produce robotics. But think about this for a minute. With our existing planets, I don't have that out there. With our existing planets, we have a level 4 command center, and even if I upgrade this to level 6, I'm only getting another 4,000 megawatts of power output. And we're already pushing the power grid here to the limit. 99.8% here. We're to the point where if these links were a little bit longer, I would need to upgrade this command center to the next level. So you can certainly try to set up a single planet robotics, and it can work, but it's a pain in the rear. Especially given how much power grid that the extractor control units take, and that each extractor control unit can only extract a single resource at a time. You're never going to get it set up so that you can fully process robotics while having 4 extractor control units running. There's just not enough power grid. You are limited to the amount of power grid, even with the maximum upgrades possible, to how much power you can have for planetary interaction, and that is your biggest constraint in being able to do this. All right. So one other thing I didn't talk about. Let me select this link here. Now you'll notice it has a capacity used. And you'll see this on the 24% showing here. When you're doing this in HiSec, you'll never have to worry about this. But there is a limit to the amount of capacity that any link can support. If you're doing this in nullsec or wormhole space, you will certainly hit this capacity. Because again, if we go back to the scan ranges here, Yeah, all right, I was able to get this up pretty high here for my heavy metals. You get up into wormholes and PEI, you can pull this thing almost all the way to the top. That's twice as much extraction going on. Now, this is only using 3 heads. Imagine double the amount of extraction and using all 10 heads. This is going to be more than 24%. This line is going to be exhausted. This link is going to be overused. You can upgrade them though. There's this upgrade link button here. And yeah, so I don't actually have the power grid to do it, but let me pretend I'm going to upgrade just to see what would happen. So that's there, and then I select the link, upgrade, and all right. So it takes more CPU and power, but it has a bigger capacity. So when it's upgraded, this is the final when it's upgraded thing. It'll double the capacity, but it'll also severely increase the CPU and the power usage for that link. And you can upgrade it multiple times. I don't know if there's an actual limit, but even when doing this in wormholes and nullsec, I never ran into any sort of problems. I'm gonna cancel these with the using the level 2 or even sometimes needing level 3 links. Okay, so this is hands down going to be your most common setup. That from any planet you're going to be extracting up through a P2 on output. And then anything beyond that, like the P3s and the P4s, you're going to consolidate together on other planets, or with the leftover space that you have on existing planets to actually produce P3s and P4s, with some rare exceptions, like if you really want to go gung ho with a plasma planet. You can also set up a planet that's dedicated just to extracting. So, like, if I was to strip off like these advanceds here and just go full on lots of extractor heads on these and just extract a single resource, I've actually got a few planets set up like that on different characters. Um, and the nice thing there is that you're being very efficient with extraction, but you're not being efficient in terms of the fees of transferring stuff on and off planet. The yeah uh, the brain fart. So the customs office tax rates, because those are going to nail you with that. The reason being is that in order for those P1s to be useful, you're going to have to convert them into P2s, 3s, and 4s, and etc. And those can only be done on planets. Or you can just sell them direct to market. I mean, that works too. Some people do that. One thing I recommend is always process what you extract on a planet into its P1 equivalent. Is every single one of these items is going to convert into a single thing. So like here, required for plasmoids, chiral structures, toxic metals, silicon, reactive metals. Every P0 will translate into a P1, and that P1 only needs that P0 as an input to do so. So always do that, especially since it reduces the size of what you're working with. That 30 cubic meter input to 7.5 cubic meter output. So always do that if you can get away with it at a bare minimum on every planet, even if you're just extracting the P1s. Okay, so at this point I am going to tab over and see if there's any questions from my corp mates. All right, folks, now's the time to ask questions. I know there's a little bit of a delay. And I'm gonna check. Oops, no, that's there we go. All right, so any questions, folks? Anything I can answer for you? Because otherwise, I'm just going to end this. All right, I'm assuming at this point, since I haven't gotten any questions, that you folks are all fine and dandy with everything. All right, so in that case, It's been fun, and I hope you found this video insightful.